Are we ready, Eric?
Yeah, if you could slide your water glass a little further away.
Is that better? I'm going to take one. Is it in the way? Or?
And Leo, if you think of any questions you want me to ask your wife, you just hit me and ask away.
Thank
you. So first, just for the camera, if you can introduce yourself and tell us how you first got involved with the coalition.
Well, I've been interested in the environment almost all my life, and then married a tree farmer and got to spend a lot of time on the environment. I also have worked on civil rights, which is my other main interest. But we worked on preserving county parks, and I've been very much concerned about water, preserving.
Yeah, the streams in the Ozarks.
Mm-hmm. The streams in the Ozarks, and also the rivers, you know, the Missouri and Mississippi River, and trying to protect the quality of the water. That it's a limited amount on our planet, so I've always had a real strong feeling about water. And I know Lou Green, one of the founders of the coalition, had a really emotional attachment to clean air. Different people with the coalition had different sort of main interests.
So I think I did not get your name, if you could just for the cameras.
K. Drey.
K. Drey. And what year did you become involved with the coalition?
Well, with Leo, I became involved, and we worked on the county park bond issue before that, and preserved. Sweetie, we're going to have trouble if you're going to talk to.
I'm out of it.
Okay.
Now, one thing, as David was preparing, he mentioned that you were also involved in the construction work in progress issue.
Right.
I've been. What that issue is.
The Coalition for the Environment was primary in the effort to try to stop having a nuclear power plant in Missouri. And so we had a petition drive in 1976 to let people vote on whether we should have to pay in advance to build a nuclear power plant. And we put it on the ballot statewide, and won. Had a 2/3 majority saying people did not want to pay in advance for a nuclear power plant to be built until it was providing electricity. And so we got rid of construction work in progress payments, and we got rid of one of two reactors that Union Electric at the time was planning. They immediately stopped building one of the two reactors they were building. And then again, they tried this year to be able to charge ratepayers in advance. And again, we worked through the legislature and with various corporations and all, and were successful in maintaining the law that we don't have to pay in advance. So again, Ameren, UE, stopped building, or announced it would not continue the effort to build a second reactor at Callaway. We have one, unfortunately.
Now, that initial campaign that was successful, I mean, that was a big achievement for the coalition.
Tremendous.
Can you talk a little bit about the campaign, how you went about it?
Well, there was a wonderful woman, Dee Aylward, who had never done anything political before, but she really didn't want a nuclear power plant, and she didn't want to have to pay in advance. And she sort of met with a lot of people, and they got together the idea of having a petition. And then Dee sort of got impatient, and she took the draft that they had down to Lou Green, who was the lawyer for the coalition, and Lou fixed it up, and Dee was off and running, and I worked with her. And then she sort of decided at the time when we had the campaign, when we already had enough signatures, she sort of retired, and I took over and tried to have to explain to the whole state what the facts were. And it's sort of the way I like to work, is to find out what the facts are, and then and read boring documents and things, and then try to get the facts to the public. And I always feel if the public knows the facts, they'll vote right and choose the right representatives and so forth.
So a lot of people have talked about that role of education, educating the public as being one of the big roles for the coalition. Can you talk about that and talk about how you educate the public on some of these issues that are so complex? I mean, these aren't easy issues that you all are taking on. How do you get the public interested and educated about those issues?
Well, I think partly the coalition has had some really good writers. I think Kat, the current executive director, is one of those, and Roger Pryor certainly was outstanding. And so, for instance, I would sometimes go to Roger with a whole bunch of boring facts, and he'd sort of put them inside his mind and come out with something really moving and important for the public to read. I think Kat has that same ability. And so I think that's what we really have to do. I don't think we can just say vote no vote against nuclear power, or vote to preserve open space, or we need to have, we shouldn't have a huge cement plant on the Mississippi River. We should not have Earth City in the floodplains. You have to be able to give them the facts as well. And sometimes it works that we're successful.
Another issue that you've been involved in a lot was with the weapons facility at Fort Leonard Wood.
Fort Leonard Wood was, unfortunately, we lost on that. But again, the Coalition for the Environment litigated on that. We tried to say that this is a facility an Army facility that had been it had been in Alabama, and they wanted to move to Fort Leonard Wood, and they told the state of Missouri, if you don't let us have the Army Chemical School at Fort Leonard Wood, that they would shut down Fort Leonard Wood. They were closing Army bases in various parts of the country. So we tried to not have the facility because it was to train people, not just from the United States, servicemen, but people from all other parts of the world, how to use chemical weapons, biological weapons, and nuclear weapons, how to nerve gas. They have a whole building there now to train people how to work with real nerve gas. It's a really creepy facility, and unfortunately, we tried to not have it. They didn't. The Air Conservation Commission of the state did a very flimsy job of examining what the facts were about the facility, and they went ahead and gave a permit and so forth. So we've had, various lawsuits, but we've lost them all. And so this hideous facility next to Mark Twain National Forest is operating.
I think Leo wants his glasses. Is it okay?
Well, maybe what
he
he might want to sit somewhere else. You want your glasses there over there. Do you want to sit out of the hot? You have so much on, sweetie. You want to take your jacket off? Okay. His are the big ones.
Oh, these?
Yeah. But you're not gonna. Yeah.
What?
I think he was looking for it. Now, you had talked about that. I want to go back a little bit. You said that you were always involved or interested in environmentalism. How did that spark start? Why did you?
Well, I think as a child, I occasionally got to go visit friends, maybe who had. One friend lived way out near Gumbo and near Chesterfield, and I got to go out and see farmland and stuff, and I always loved that. And I just had a really strong feeling for trees and birds and so forth. I knew nothing about it. When I married Leo, I didn't know the difference between a lake and a river. So I had very little, background. I had very few opportunities to enjoy the out of doors, but I always loved it. Yeah, we floated. Leo took me on. I'm going to have a problem.
That's okay.
I have enough trouble concentrating. Leo took me on something like 14 float trips before he decided to marry me. But I did, when I first met him, somebody asked him I thought she said, "How is your tree?" And I said, "Oh, do you have a tree? I'm a tree worshiper." And Leo actually by that time had 100,000 acres of trees, but he just left, and he just said, he walked away, and that was the end of our conversation. I didn't see him again for another 6 months, but I as I've decided to say now, I was a tree worshiper, and I still am, and I'm also a tree farmer worshiper. So, but at any rate, I think almost anyone who has a chance to work in the out of doors or just enjoy the out of doors, it becomes a part of their lives. And I helped establish an organization in University City called the Green Center, and we're trying to help young people enjoy the out of doors and be comfortable in it.
You mentioned that you were also involved in civil rights. Is there a connection between those two passions?
Well, I just believe in equality. Actually, civil rights is my main interest, but I feel that if I've been fighting nuclear power for 35 years as of next month. I made my first speech in November of 1974, and the more I learn about nuclear power and radioactive waste, the more disturbing it becomes to me. And I believe that if we don't have a planet, it really won't matter if people know how to get along together. But I don't know if there's a connection. I did study cultural anthropology, and I love American Indians, every American Indian. I have the opposite of a prejudice. And part of that is, their great respect for the out of doors, for nature. So maybe they're sort of intertwined.
You mentioned that first speech on nuclear issues. Do you remember that speech? What was...
It was very interesting for me because it was November 13th, 1974, and my neighbor next door, Loretto Murphy, had come over 2 days before then, and she said she had met an engineer at a party the night before, and that he told her that Union Electric was going to build a nuclear power plant in Missouri. They wanted to, and that it would be built on a limestone plateau. And Loretto said the engineer told her that if the water got out of the reactor, that the fuel could get hotter and hotter and melt right through the building and get into the groundwater, and there could be an explosion of radioactive steam. And she said, "Kay, you've got to do something about it." So she went home, and then the next night I saw somebody who asked if I was going to testify the next day at a hearing in Clayton, a Missouri Senate committee hearing. And so that night I read as much as I could in that day, and I guess it was 2 days later, and I took a bunch of documents to my neighbor around the corner, Art Wall, who's deceased, but he was a professor of radiochemistry I knew at Washington University. And I also knew he was a co-discoverer of plutonium. And I kept reading about how plutonium was the most dangerous substance known to man. And so I took a bunch of documents to Art's house the night before my speech, and I said, is it true that plutonium is very dangerous? And he said, well, it really, as long as you have even a piece of Kleenex between you and the plutonium, it's not a problem. Well, if you inhale it or swallow it, it is a great big problem. And so I just read up as much as I could and wrote my speech from the back of the hearing room, as I usually often do, and have been working on it ever since, because I really feel that, it's absolutely a dirty, dangerous, and expensive technology. I just completed a pamphlet that I've been working on with Arlene Sandler on the coalition board. We've been working for 5 years off and on our pamphlet, and it is about to be printed probably in a week. And it's called Nuclear Power is Dirty, Dangerous, and Expensive.
Now, when you were preparing for that very first speech, were those coalition people who you were? There
were some coalition people who also testified, and I think a lot of people believe that in order to talk about something technical like nuclear power, they need a science background or mathematics background or something. And I think that's a huge role that the coalition has played, is to say, you know, you can read these things, they make fact sheets and so forth that are trying to get out the major facts. And that I had no math background and no chemistry and no physics, but some of it is just common sense and a lot of it is morals. I think it's an immoral technology. But I think people can, I've put on a lot of hearings with coalition members and others in the community, and I usually have people come over to our house. I have a huge library of documents, and talk with somebody about, you know, what about nuclear power is of concern to you, or radioactive waste, and then I give them a topic and give them stuff to read. And
what usually moves people to get involved? I mean, you happened to meet Leo and he got you involved. But what draws people to the coalition?
I think people are drawn to the coalition because they are concerned about the environment. And I think people in your generation, you know, young people, I'm 76 years old, but young people have heard about the environment, know about it, and do care about it. I think they know a lot of people go out and buy SUVs and get involved in urban sprawl and something. But I think they've been brought up with an appreciation of the out of doors, and that we have a limited amount of water on the planet. We've got to protect it. We have to have clean air, good land use, and there are now, you know, a lot of young parents and so forth who want to preserve the planet for their children and grandchildren.
Do they usually come in with one issue in mind?
Well, I usually just sort of, if I know that somebody's at all interested, or sometimes they'll phone and say, what can I do to help or something. If they get into our house, they don't get out without a topic or something, but they want to help people. I think people feel strongly about helping with the environment, and that's what the coalition has been really very good about, is providing information, and it has had a library in the past of good documents and getting people informed about the issues. And I think people have to know some of the facts, because if you don't, then the bad guys will say something that's not correct. You have to be able to respond. So I guess
We had all that timberland in the Ozarks and clear Ozark streams, and all are part of our life. We floated on.
Very good.
Do you want some of this, sweetie? Okay.
What are you talked a little bit about the construction work in progress. We talked a little bit about the weapons facility. What are some of the other sort of landmark issues, the big accomplishments of the coalition?
Well, one of the fights that Lou Green headed for the coalition was fighting Earth City, which unfortunately we lost. We won the big battle in that in the future, private company cannot build a levee without permission from the Corps of Engineers. You know, that was a very huge victory. But by that time, Earth City had already built, or the corporations out there had already built a levee, a crummy levee on the Missouri River, and used floodplain land that was 90 feet deep topsoil, some of the best farmland on the planet. And so I think that was a big fight for the coalition, and even though, you know, Earth City was built on the floodplain, I think Lou made some very important made some important legal headway. And let's see, I have to think about what else. You know, some of the things we've worked on don't win, but I think there's been an effort to fight against urban sprawl. Excuse me.
Well, that's where it all started, with land use issues. Now we expanded on other concerns. But first the Open Space Council, then the Coalition for the Environment.
And I think the coalition has worked with some whistleblowers. During the construction of the Callaway plant, there was an iron worker named Bill Smart who submitted a lot of important concerns to the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission through the coalition, and I think made the plant a little bit safer. It's still not safe. The coalition has been working on trying to clean up radioactive waste in St. Louis City and County and St. Charles County. Mallinckrodt Chemical Works processed or purified all the uranium that went into the world's first self-sustaining nuclear chain reaction. That reaction at the University of Chicago happened in December 1942. All of that uranium was processed here in St. Louis, purified in total secrecy, a mile from downtown St. Louis. And Mallinckrodt continued processing uranium for 15 years downtown and for another 10 years at Weldon Spring and St. Charles, and then left behind radioactive waste all over the place. Big site next to the St. Louis airport. The downtown Mallinckrodt Chemical Works site is contaminated. They're still cleaning it up. There are sites in Hazelwood, and $1 billion was spent on the cleanup of Weldon Spring in St. Charles County, where we now have a 45-acre, 7-story high bunker full of radioactive waste. It shouldn't be there. But the coalition really headed the effort to inform the public about the sites and to try to get them cleaned up. And I think that's a huge victory. Right now we have one site left that we're still concerned about, which is Westlake Landfill in the Missouri River floodplain. Really hot radioactive waste, uranium residues from the Belgian Congo, the richest ore at the time, known at the time in the world. Rich meaning really radioactively hot. And the EPA wants to leave it in the floodplain of the Missouri River and just cover it with some rocks and a little bit of clay and construction rubble and walk away from it. So this is a big fight for the coalition that we're continuing, and we're hoping we can get the Environmental Protection Agency to reconsider its record of decision.
You've mentioned several battles that the coalition ended up losing.
But that was a victory.
That was a victory.
Those cleaning up all those sites is a victory.
How do, and I think people have talked about the victories a lot. Maybe not as many have talked about the losses, but how does the coalition deal with those losses, or you individually, when you have this issue that you devote so much time to, so much energy, and then you come out on the other side?
It's hard. I mean, like with Forest Park, the coalition worked hard to protect the open space in Forest Park, and now the stupid art museum's going to build an ugly glass nothing, using up part of the Forest Park land. Well, the coalition won all kinds of battles at the ballot place and so forth, and ultimately we lost the fight to keep the art museum from expanding in the park. I personally worked on trying to, and the coalition people too, trying to have the art museum use the absolutely wonderful, historic, and beautiful old post office on Olive Street Road on Olive downtown as a satellite art museum, but we lost that fight. And I don't know, I usually on Mondays I'm depressed and I sort of think nothing will work, but then I get over that and keep working on the same issues for, as I said, for 35 years. And you win some and you lose some, but and along the way there've just been a whole lot of people who've joined in these various fights and continue them, and that's what the coalition provides, this continuity.
That's great. Since you've been with and around the coalition from the very beginning, what are some of the biggest changes in those 40 years? Since we're celebrating the 40th anniversary, what are the biggest changes you've seen?
Well, I think that I like the fact that the coalition is still in the Del Mar Loop, you know, near Washington University and not that far from St. Louis U and University of Missouri and other colleges. So I think there's been a lot of participation from college students and the public. I guess the coalition has more and more fights it has to take on all at the same time, and in that respect, it's a real challenge. But I think it's been pretty steady all along, having a very good board and trying to keep the members informed. And now, of course, there's the computer and the website and all. I think that's been, that's certainly a big change. And even an ability, when necessary, to let people communicate via the website, write to their elected officials and all. And I still think, it's a real uphill battle trying to educate the elected officials and get them to stand up to industry and so on.
You talked about the stability of the organization. Was it always that way, or were there times where in that 40-year history where you thought, oh, we're not going to be able to keep this together? Or? I guess not. I guess it's my naivete or my inability to quit or something. But there were times when there were big money problems and so on, and that continues. There's that effort, and I personally have wanted the coalition and Great Rivers Environmental Law Center somehow to combine, and that's something I wish would happen. So we wouldn't be competing for the same dollars, but working more closely together. The Great Rivers Environmental Law Center was set up by Lou Green, and then also Ted Heisel, who was with the coalition, who is an outstanding lawyer and a wonderful person. I sort of wish there wasn't fragmentation. I wish somehow, and that was sort of how the coalition was formed, and at the time it was a coalition of a lot of organizations. And, but really...
Yeah, we started with land use issues, but then we expanded to other environmental concerns.
That's right. And I guess that with a coalition, though, each of the organizations had its own interests. The Audubon Society was interested in birds, and so it's hard really to have a coalition. So the coalition has been sort of on its own, but I think it's been very effective. Working with the media, trying to get the facts to the media, things like that. And I don't know, I never thought it would fail. I didn't ever think it would grow to be and live to be 40 years old. That's pretty darn impressive. It's hard to believe, in fact. 40 years, that's a long time.
And what do you think the challenges for the future will be for the next 40 years? What are the big issues that maybe the coalition didn't face when it first started out?
Well, I think the interest in alternative energy, safe, renewable, non-nuclear energy, maybe if there could ever be cleaner coal. I guess those kinds of issues are very important, and the coalition has been very effective in working for that as well with Proposition C or whatever it was called. And I guess we'll have transportation concerns, and I wish we had better mass transit. I like bus rapid transit better than light rail. It's cheaper and more flexible and can reach out to communities that really need public transportation. So there's still a whole lot of issues, and there are issues that we don't even know about that are going to lie ahead of us. And I think we have to continue trying to get young people interested and feeling that they can make a difference, and people can make a difference. They may not work around the clock the way I do, which is probably, I'm a manic depressive, and I either am depressed or I'm manic, I guess. I work, it's all very important, and it's challenging, and I think people feel good when they've had successes, and the coalition has certainly had successes.
Wonderful. I just wanted to get one other thing, because I want to make sure I have it on tape, and that is your interest in nuclear issues. When did that first start? Was that with that first party where someone asked you?
Well, it was my neighbor who asked me, and I started reading about it and learning about radiation and the fact that the stuff they're creating in these nuclear power plants will be radioactive and hazardous virtually forever. You know, I learned that uranium-238 has a half-life of 4.5 billion years, and you have to multiply the half-life by at least 10 to know how long it will still be giving off radioactive particles and giving off harmful rays. It's forever, and we have no place for even the first cupful of radioactive waste. There's not any place on the planet Earth. People say, well, France has a lot of nuclear power plants and so forth. They have no place for the waste either. And so I learned more about the waste. I learned about the fact that every nuclear power plant releases radioactive waste into the air and into, in our case, the Missouri River, even when there's no accident, literally every day into the air and into the water. They're releasing radioactive waste. And, excuse me. I learned that workers are allowed to be exposed to much more radiation than a member of the general public. And I just think that the more I learned about it and the dangers, as we saw with 3 Mile Island. With 3 Mile Island, we were very lucky that it had only been operating effectively for 3 months when the accident happened. If it had been operating for several decades or even for several years, full years, the amount of radioactivity that would have escaped into the environment would have been much, much greater. And we already know of a lot of health effects on the young people and fetuses and animals and plants because of the radiation released from 3 Mile Island in Pennsylvania. But we also then had the experience with Russia, and I just in the last week saw a bunch of photographs of children who were exposed to the Chernobyl accident or else were fetuses at the time of the accident. Totally deformed, horrible children who most people don't even know about. So the more I've learned about nuclear power, the more I dislike it.
And that interest in education all sparked from that one dinner party conversation? Yeah.
And well, you know, then the fact that I made a speech, and then, you know, I worked for Planned Parenthood on the board and wrote a pamphlet about family planning and all, and I had worked on a lot of other uphill battles, civil rights being among them. And I guess my feeling is how important it is just to find out what the facts are and to read the documents or read fact sheets that the coalition creates or whatever. We just have to have an informed public, and we have to try to get to the elected officials. And so the more I learn, the more I want to learn. I could spend far more hours in the day if there were more, because it's and nuclear power is such a crummy technology. It's dirty, dangerous, and expensive.
Great. Well, I think that's very good. I think that puts a lot of the work of the coalition into context and sort of tells us about the change over time. Is there anything maybe in your conversations with David or what he sent you thought, oh, we should talk about this? Maybe
I can't remember what he sent. Do you have?
I think we addressed a lot of it because I know talked a lot about the nuclear issues, and he talked about the weapons facility.
Well, the Army Chemical School, I wish there were some people who would pay attention to it. We know it's releasing horrible stuff into the atmosphere. There's something called fog oil. They're just horrible. It's a horrible, horrible facility. But we don't hear anything about it. Most Missouri people don't know we have it here. It used to be in Alabama, but they don't know it's here. It's a very dangerous facility. And unfortunately, my guess is that now that it's in operation, that the Army probably doesn't have to tell the public much.
Well, so you talked about, when you talked about the people involved in Chernobyl, you mentioned that people don't know about them. They don't know about the
They don't
deformities.
know about the deformed children.
You said the same thing with Fort Leonard Wood, that people don't know this is going. How do you break through? I mean, what is the thing keeping people from knowing about these issues?
Well, in the case of Fort Leonard Wood, the Army Chemical School, I think the Army probably gets to say it's secret. They don't. But it is a very, very bad. They were using a chemical that is a known carcinogen, and various people from the coalition, the Sierra Club and so forth, asked about it before this facility was going to be established, when we were still fighting and hoping it wouldn't come to Missouri from Alabama. They said they didn't want this horrible chemical used and released into the environment in Missouri near the Ozarks, in the Ozark Mountains and forests. And so the Army said, well, we're not going to use that particular chemical anymore. We're going to use terephthalic acid instead. And I called a chemical engineer who's been a member of the coalition from way back when, and he looked it up and he said that terephthalic acid was absolutely as toxic as hexachloroethane, which is what they were using in the past. And I guess it does have a whole round building for teaching people how to deal with nerve gas, for heaven's sakes, here in Missouri. And I don't know, we raised questions about whether they're going to have an incinerator to get rid of their waste by burning it and putting it up into the atmosphere or not, and we just didn't get, I don't know today what they are doing with their waste, because there are really no good places anywhere for these very long-lived toxic chemicals and radioactive chemicals and so forth from Fort Leonard Wood. And they're putting stuff into some of the wonderful Ozark streams. So I don't know. How we get this information to the public is the hardest thing of all. And unfortunately, not a whole lot of reporters are interested in finding out about it. A lot of reporters today think it's better to say happy news than it is to grab things and really look into them and find out how bad they are. And I'm not sure that a lot of newspapers and the media want to give unhappy news, and that makes it hard to talk about the environment.
Do you think there's an appetite from the audience for that kind of news, and how does that compare to when the coalition started?
Well, I think more people are interested in the environment than they were 40 years ago. Certainly young people, your generation and so on, know that we have a limited amount of water to drink and so forth on our planet. I think people do care, and it's not that they don't care, because everyone wants clean water and clean air and land for close by farm produce. It's so absurd to go to Trader Joe's and get frozen string beans brought from France, for heaven's sakes, or pasta fabricated in I can't remember. I got some package of pasta that was made somewhere. I can't remember, somewhere absurd, like Greece or something. I think it was Greece. And we have, particularly here where we are at the confluence, which is something Leo worked on many years to try to preserve the confluence, with the fact that we're at the confluence of the Mississippi and the Missouri rivers. And we have preserved that to some extent. Now they want to build a casino right there. I mean, it's just a constant fight. The coalition's fighting that also. So, but the public does care, and Leo was a superb petition collector, and he never, whenever he would say we're trying to save open space, we don't want nuclear power because it's dangerous, dirty, and expensive, or whatever, people wanted to sign the petition. They want a safe, clean environment. Everybody wants that. I called Senator John Kerry's office yesterday. I couldn't get through to his office because he's going to promote more nuclear power. He and Barbara Boxer, so that they can get a climate change bill passed. They're saying, well, if we have to have more nuclear power, and even though there's no place for any of the waste for the 104 reactors we have now already, And so I called Senator Kerry's office in Boston to say, I said, I'm not from Massachusetts, but I really think Senator Kerry is wrong to want more nuclear power plants because there's no place for the waste and so forth. And I talked a little bit and I said, it's an immoral technology. And the young man with whom I was speaking said, you're right. So I hope he says that to Senator Kerry. But, you know, the public wants a safe environment, and they don't want huge accidents. They don't want horrible accidents. We're right in the middle of the country here in Missouri, and we get the transport by train and truck of an awful lot of scary stuff. And we just have to have, and a lot of young people are studying environmental issues now in college. I think that's very hopeful, and in high school even. And I think that'll affect their lives in the future and how they vote in the future. And I'm hopeful.
Great. Well, I think that's a good hopeful note to end on. Well,
All right.
Well, thank you very much. I do have a couple of pieces of
We have to sign.
paperwork. Yeah.
Okay.
Um,
I'm sorry, my voice is just age.
let's see. I'll sign this part. Oh no, that's the wrong one. Make sure I get yours.